So thanks everybody for being here, joining today's webinar called Quantifying Ecosystem Service Benefits of Roadless Areas. My name is Josh Hicks. I'm the Conservation Director at Wilderness Society. I'll be the MC for today's webinar. Appreciate you all taking the time to participate. So today's webinar is in the context of the administration's effort to repeal the Forest Service's Roadless Area Conservation Rule. And as many of you are most likely very familiar, there's many values to national forest roadless areas: water quality, intact habitat, recreation, etc. One of these values is the economic value of the ecosystem services national forest inventory roadless areas provide. So Earth Economics has developed a tool to estimate the economic value of these inventory roadless areas nationally and by state. So our goal with today's webinar is to provide an overview of the findings and methods of Earth Economics analysis to inform everybody's advocacy in the repeal of the roadless rule. So some logistics and ground rules. The webinar is being recorded. We'll have a link to share at some point after the webinar. Our run of show today. So we're going to first hear from the folks at Earth Economics for about 30 minutes about the tool that they've developed, their findings, their analysis, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A after that. I expect we'll probably end about a quarter to the hour, but we go in for the full hour if there is robust discussion. Everybody's microphone is muted now, and we're going to keep it that way until the Q&A, and then we'll kind of lift that, and people can come off mute if they have questions, or meanwhile, you can also post questions in the chat at any point during the webinar, and we'll get to those during the Q&A after we hear from Earth Economics. So now I'm going to kind of introduce the panelists. I'm pleased to introduce the folks from Earth Economics. We're going to be hearing from Glenn Delaney and Angela Fletcher with Earth Economics. Quickly about Earth Economics, they are a nonpartisan, nonprofit specializing in environmental economics research. They aim to prove that nature is not just an environmental asset, it's a powerful economic opportunity. Their team quantifies and values the benefits nature provides to people, communities, and organizations, fostering effective decisions that prioritize the well-being of people and nature. In terms of the Roadless campaign, Earth Economics is not advocating for a specific policy outcome, but their role is to make sure that nature's value is included in decision making. Glenn Delaney is the Director of Partnerships at Earth Economics. He's led the valuations of diverse ecosystems from salmon habitat restoration in Washington to the Greater Everglades. Glenn works with partner organizations to identify how economic analysis can support real-world decisions and shape projects that help advance their goals. He leads the project management and outreach for the Roadless Rule work. Angela Fletcher is Earth Economics Senior Researcher and Data Manager. She creates and maintains the tools and data critical to high-quality project deliverables while also establishing organization standards and quality control. Angela oversees the management and development of Earth Economics Ecosystem Valuation Toolkit, which underpins most of their work. Angela led the research and analysis for the Roadless Rule evaluation. So thanks again, everybody, for being here. And with that, Glenn, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Josh. And hello, everybody. As Josh said, we'll aim for 30 minutes of PowerPoint because no one likes long PowerPoints. We're going to give you the high-level summary of the analysis first, so that you have that in case you need to hop off. Then we'll step back and dig deeper into valuation of ecosystem services. We'll cover the model that was used and, importantly, its limitations. And then we'll go into what Earth Economics can do at a state level if you think more sophisticated analysis would help you locally. So as Josh has said, we're a nonpartisan environmental economics research nonprofit. Our headquarters is in Tacoma, Washington. But like a lot of folks, we're now remote across the country. So I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Angela is in Tacoma. Josh shared our mission, but I'll add that we specialize in valuing ecosystem services of landscape level ecosystems and nature-based solutions going down to green stormwater infrastructure in size. But we also use other economic analysis, like estimating the ripple effect of spending on restoration or recreation through a state or county economy, so contribution analysis. And we map the beneficiaries of services. And we do this to help groups tell a story about why protecting and restoring nature is important. And everyone on this call is dedicated to protecting nature, and I'm sure is concerned about the many proposals on the future of public lands that seem to be coming thick and fast. As Josh said, we are a 501(c). We can't engage in lobbying, but we can participate in educational advocacy, which is what we're doing right now. 2 years ago, we developed a high-level valuation tool suitable for awareness raising. We reached out to Josh late last year and agreed to run that high-level valuation tool on the roadless areas to support you and others with this research. How you use it and with whom is up to you. We just want to make sure that you have all the context so that you can use it defensively. So the roadless areas are just under 60 million acres. This analysis focuses on the 30 million or 29.9 acres in the contiguous US. We weren't able to run the tool on the 15 million in Alaska as there isn't robust riparian mapping, which is a variable in the tool. And we report the 13.5 million acres in Colorado and Idaho separately as they're protected through state legislation. And we found that 30 million acres create at least $24 billion in ecosystem services annually from 12 services. There are a lot of caveats to that, and we're going to explain what that valuation is based on, the methodology we use to get it, and then what it's suitable for. I assume that most people on this call will be familiar with ecosystem services, so just a very brief refresher to get us on the same page. This graphic shows how ecosystems or natural capital provide functions that result in benefits to people and industry. Now, here we can see that forests clean and filter water, which flow to people in the form of drinkable water, and this flow of potable water is an ecosystem service provided by the forest. And communities and economies are dependent on these environmental resources for survival and quality of life. We and other frameworks divide ecosystem services into 4 categories, generally about 20 or so services. Provisioning, what we can extract responsibly from nature on an annual basis. Regulating how ecosystems maintain equilibrium, so soil quality, water quality, flood regulation. Support for biodiversity through habitat. And community or information, how we interact with ecosystems through beautification of our properties or recreation or even our very niche cultural use. And it's not just benefits to people. Increasingly, businesses are integrating natural capital and ecosystem services into their decision making, particularly around water and climate resilience. And that can result in tension when a data center, for example, is built in a watershed and uses massive amounts of water. But it can also be viewed as an opportunity as the private sector realizes it needs to invest in natural capital to provide those services and that they are reliant upon it. Why do we value nature? Traditionally, the benefits people receive from nature have been excluded from conventional analyses, and that can lead to inefficient decisions and potentially higher future costs. Most of these services are on markets. No one pays to receive them, but we know inherently that they have value. I think everyone on this call would probably live next to an acre of forest than an acre of parking lot, even though that parking lot creates revenue. We want to recreate in that forest. We avoid stormwater runoff. Our house prices increase. Our children are healthier. And valuation of ecosystem services allows us to include the value of nature within decision making by enabling us to compare those environmental, social benefits and costs to the traditional economic benefits and costs. So we allow for that apples to apples comparison of different projects or alternatives that include or omit natural functions. More broadly, the natural environment is often an afterthought and not viewed as a type of capital like other resources, such as a water treatment facility. Positioning nature as natural capital is an effort to reverse this perspective and communicate that ecosystems are a form of infrastructure that provide key services to society. And unlike grey infrastructure, natural capital doesn't deteriorate over time, making it a long-term and sustainable solution. And these resources are finite and they can be degraded by human activity or exhausted by improper management. So by valuing ecosystem services, we're articulating dollars what we risk losing, and we can better manage our existing resources and strengthen community well-being. Over to you, Angela.
Thanks, Glenn. So we typically use secondary methods, what is known in this space as the benefit transfer method. This is defined as using a value estimate in a location or context other than the one in which it was published. Of course, a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot to consider when we decide what values are appropriate to transfer between one site and another. There's also several different ways one can do benefit transfer. So the probably first and most traditional way and most common is to take a unit value. This could be $1 per acre, $1 per person, $1 per household, any sort of unit value, and apply it to the number of relevant units at a different site. So when we do value transfer, we use our internal database of values we've curated for more than a decade. This resource is the base of all our projects. I think Josh mentioned it earlier. Thank you, Josh. As you can imagine, having a repository of already reviewed and standardized values really facilitates the benefit transfer process. So when we have a project, we can construct a customized data set by easily filtering out the most relevant values for our study area. Then we can apply that data set to our study site. There is also what's known as function transfer. This involves taking published value functions to derived customized values for a study site. So value functions are equations that relate a unit value of some ecosystem service to characteristics of the ecosystem studied and beneficiaries of the service. These functions could be derived from a single primary study or from multiple in a meta-analysis. So you take site-specific information, use it as inputs to a model, and then get a value tailored to those characteristics. You can then use that customized value to apply it to whatever units are at your study site. This method has really gained attention recently as studies have shown that on average, it can have less error than the traditional value transfer method. However, the type of method you use really just depends on your context and how good the available valuation data is. So for the roadless rules analysis, we went the function transfer route. We have estimated an internal meta-analysis to support function transfer of ecosystem service values at scale. The current model that we're using is based on 173 studies from the United States, and it produces unique values by the climate zone the study is in, riparian and urban characteristics of the ecosystems at the site, the overall size of the site, as well as some demographic information like GDP and population density around the site that can go down as small as the county level. So the really powerful thing about these types of models is that we are able to estimate unique values for individual sites across the country in bulk. For example, the various roadless areas that we looked at. So with some programming tricks, this can be done very rapidly. However, Glenn mentioned we were only able to run the model on areas in the lower 48 because of some of the limitations of the data sources we were using. They just weren't available in Alaska or Hawaii. So specific to this analysis, we estimated all the required model data from public sources. So first, we used the National Land Cover Database to estimate land cover acres. Riparian zones were identified with the National Riparian Areas layer by the Forest Service. Urban zones were characterized with the 2020 census designated urban areas. Climate zones are defined by the Köppen-Geiger climate classification. Population density was also obtained from census, specifically the 1-year American Community Service or survey data. And GDP came from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. One big caveat that I want to mention now is that the model is based on limited data. Not every land cover and ecosystem service has been researched or researched enough to be reliably included in a model. So to be conservative, we estimated values of land cover and ecosystem service combinations that had sufficient data within the data that built the model. So for example, We have many values on air quality for forests, grasslands, and shrublands, but none for wetlands. So we valued that service for those 3 land covers, but not for others. While we could predict value with the model for all land cover and service combinations, we felt that dropping them was a little more defensible as they really just aren't supported by the underlying data. So using the data available in the model, we estimated unique values for the land cover and ecosystem service combinations that we did have values for by congressional district. So these unique values by congressional district were then scaled by all roadless rural acres within that district. So we've created a short little demo here of the dashboard, which you can find on our website. It summarizes the total values and land cover makeup of the roadless rules in the selection. We'll scroll down here in the video in a second. There we go. So down here, if you scroll down on the web page, you can view the dashboard and explore the data. There's 2 filters, one by state and one for the congressional districts. The congressional districts are filtered by the state, so you can't look at districts across states. So to see how the dashboard works in action, the video here will change the state that's selected. And I went with Washington since that's where I'm based out of. You'll see the dashboard is updated. We've got 2.1 billion in ecosystem service value provided by 2 million roadless acres. 84% of those areas are forest with a little bit of shrubland in there as well. You can do the breakdown of the total annual value by service on the bar chart on the left. You'll notice when you switch states, automatically all congressional districts will be selected. And we can change this with the second drop down. You can select just one. So here I've chosen the 6th district, which has 85,000 acres, providing 153 million in service value. It's almost all forest. We can also select more than one district, and the dashboard will update accordingly. So I selected a couple more here in the video. And yeah. So at the bottom of the dashboard also is a link where you can open the dashboard just in a new tab. And this kind of just expands it and zoom in. So the whole thing's just a little bit bigger. You can see things a little bit better. And that's the demo. So feel free to go to the link and check it out. Lastly, I'd like to touch on some framing of these results. So as with any type of analysis, this one also has limitations. There's others as well, but I put the 2 biggest ones here on the slide. First is data gaps. I've mentioned this a couple times. The model is estimated from published literature. We did not value certain ecosystem services on some land cover types because of this issue. While forests and wetlands by far have the most valuation literature tied to them, grasslands and shrublands are much less studied. Many of the roadless areas are forested, but there's also a lot of shrubland as well, especially in drier areas of the country, and those areas will be underestimated. This doesn't imply that these services or places are not valuable, and we actually caution against comparing total values for land covers against one another for that reason. It simply reflects the gaps in the available literature, and it also means that all of these values for all land cover types should be considered underestimates. Finally, the model is limited by what we can observe from the published economic studies and other data. Our model includes 5 different ways that values can be adjusted, but there's certainly other differences that exist that we just can't account for. And then finally, on these numbers specifically, these state-by-state results are conservative, high-level estimates. They should not be used to influence policy or funding decisions. They're intended to demonstrate the scale of ecosystem service benefits of roadless areas, as well as the types of analysis that are possible, just to really show in a ballpark sense how valuable these areas are. More in-depth analysis would be needed to really assess policy or decision outcomes. at the end of the day, this was a rapid analysis for raising awareness, and we would love to work with more partners to create more precise site level estimates, as I think Glenn alluded to earlier. And with that, I'll pass it back to Glenn for next steps. Thanks.
Thanks, Angela. So now you understand how to use and present these high-level results with their limitations and maintain credibility. This is our first time engaging in large-scale educational advocacy. We'd love to know if and how you use the results. And we're also quite open to answering any issues or questions you have, not only in the next 40 minutes, but also you're welcome to email us, and we'll include our emails on the last slide. And we would also love to work with you directly on state-specific issues, which makes a nice segue to discussing what a state-level analysis would look like. So very briefly, we are focused on using economic analysis to help groups protect and restore nature. And as Andrea's laid out, the rapid valuation tool is a very high-level approach, but the results are enough to raise awareness. And this can be run at different scales. Last year, we used the model to support the Ohio River Basin Alliance with economic analysis for the 2025 Ohio River Restoration Act, which was introduced in the House in November last year and in the Senate in early February. And this act would officially recognize the Ohio River Basin, which covers 14 states, 15 if you count 50 acres in South Carolina, as being valuable. And it would create an EPA program and allocate $1.5 billion to help restore ecosystems throughout the basin over the next 5 years. So we found, using this model, the total value of 69 million acres of natural ecosystems in the basin created at least $50 billion in ecosystem services annually. And we reported these values by congressional districts, as we've done for the Roadless Rules analysis. So now the Ohio River Basin Alliance can talk to individual legislators, and they can say, nature in this district creates at least this much economic value, non-market economic value every year. At a smaller scale, we recently partnered with the Indiana Forest Alliance and used the model to support a piece of legislation to expand Indiana's only wilderness area, the Charles Dean Wilderness, and establish the new Benjamin Harrison National Recreation Area. And this landscape is the largest block of contiguous wild forest in the lower Midwest, with so many recreation opportunities and an ecological value. It's also one of the most visited wilderness areas in the eastern US. And the act would expand the current acreage from 23,000 acres to 55,000 acres. We found that the combined natural ecosystems provide at least $235 million per year, or $5.4 billion in public benefits over 30 years. So this rapid valuation tool is quite flexible. It can be tailored to different scales and needs and produce results fairly quickly, around a week to a month, depending on the scale of the sites. Our traditional ecosystem services valuation approach is more robust and suitable for policy making. A good example is our work with the Nature Conservancy in Ohio earlier this year. They commissioned us to value the benefits of the 11,000 acres of wetlands restored through the H2 Ohio program. And as an Ohioan, I think this program is fantastic. It funds wetland restoration, along with funding farmers to adopt best management practices, all with the goal of reducing harmful algal blooms, mainly in Lake Erie, but also across the state. But the program's budget was cut this year. And we used a more robust wetland-specific function transfer model based on about 170 wetland values to estimate that the 11,000 acres generate $297 million to $308 million in public values from 7 ecosystem services annually. When compared to the investment in the program, which is about $30 million per year, that means for every $1 Ohio spends on wetlands, residents receive at least $8 in benefits. And one of the tools I'll mention very briefly, which we used in the H2 Ohio analysis, which could be applied at a state level to the roadless areas, is an approach we call beneficiary mapping, where we use geospatial analysis to identify what populations are actually benefiting from each service by looking at the service shed. So wetlands reduce flooding within 3 miles of a site. We can look at homes and other infrastructure within nearby floodplains. Restoration of nature increases property values of homes within a 1 mile buffer. or for accessible recreation sites, restoration sites, people living with a certain walkshed can visit the site for recreational purposes, usually a mile to 3 miles. And using this approach, we found that the new wetlands benefited 11.38 million Ohioans across 87 of 88 counties. And this analysis, together with evaluation, is helping the Nature Conservancy to educate legislators on the importance of H2 Ohio in their districts. So that is the end of our presentation. 25 minutes. We have an extra 5 minutes for questions if you so choose. Thank you for listening, and we can move to Q&A.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Diana, I saw that you had your hand raised there for a bit. So, Ronnie, I don't know, are you able to take everybody or at least Diana off mute so she can ask her question?
I did, Dan, and you should be able to come off mute to ask your question.
I didn't really mean to raise my hand. I was trying to get into the chat.
Gotcha. Well, you got
Sorry.
in. No worries. Anybody else have questions? I have a couple, if nobody else does. Oh, here we go. Vera, can you explain the method for calculating habitat value?
Yeah, so all of the ecosystem services that we valued come from this meta-analysis that we estimated from our database. It's based on published studies. Published studies for habitat typically value that service through surveys, like willingness to pay, asking people, how much would you be willing to pay to preserve or restore such and such habitat? So typically there'll be, yeah, those like survey type based valuation methods for habitat, if that answers your question.
Vera, Ronnie, I'm not sure how the muting function is working, but Vera, if you're able to come off mute, feel free to come off mute if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's helpful. So on the habitat surveys where you're asking people, I presume you're asking them like, how much is this worth to you, or how much would you pay if you could see this animal or something like that? Are they national, or are there certain regions you base that on? Do you have a little bit more in-depth methodology for this?
It varies. We're not the ones doing those surveys ourselves. It's the published primary studies that are doing them. So it could be like at a state level or smaller than a state. It just kind of depends on the research. They are all then combined into our meta-analysis model. So.
Sorry to be harping on this. That's super helpful. Do you have maybe this is naive of me asking, but is there like a list of the peer-reviewed literature that you use as a basis for your model?
Yes, we can provide that, I think, Glenn.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
And that covers willingness to pay for both ecosystems. And I think we didn't include charismatic species in this model, but there are individual studies on the value of a salmon or Chinook in Oregon to a household, which is about 18 cents per salmon.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Do folks have other questions? Oh, Mike Browning, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I think I saw one of the categories of benefits was aesthetic, and I'm wondering how that valuation was obtained.
For aesthetic value, it's mostly done through what's called hedonic analysis. So it's looking at how property prices change based on different attributes. So in our context, it's usually like distance to a natural feature or amount of natural feature, or like a restoration action, and then how that contributes to housing price increases. So that differential can be attributed to the ecosystem in question. So it's, yeah, different, similar to the habitat. Like they're different services typically have like a specific method tied for them, and aesthetic value, yeah, is most often with the hedonic price method.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one. So for the roadless analysis that you guys did, it's pretty big, on the scale of millions of acres. And then you guys can cut it into congressional district when we start to get into tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres, maybe millions of acres, depending on the size of the district. But how kind of small of an area can your tool get? And here's why I ask, among other things, at least in the roadless context, many of these roadless areas are like the pipeline to maybe future protections down the road, for like a place-based, legislative proposal or other kind of administrative proposal where individual roadless areas are sort of like targeted for even enhanced protections. Can your tool be cut by like almost individual roadless areas?
It could be, I would say the kind of bottom limit of the size of a site would be under about an acre. Like extremely small, like city level sites are hard to include because the underlying data under the model tends to be sort of larger areas than, say, like a little urban forest, perhaps, or like street trees, right? So I would say anything larger than an acre is still within the bounds of the data that we included.
It's pretty small. Okay, thanks.
Can I add to that? One of the consistent patterns in valuation literature is that smaller sites are valued acre per acre or acre v acre at a higher rate than much larger sites. And that could be in correlation with small urban studies where the value from a park is a lot greater because of things like the hedonic property price increase. So the model results at a large scale will be less than if we ran the model individually on all the roadless areas. The value would be greater at that smaller scale. And that's just because of the way the literature pulls into the model.
Another question is, how long does it take to do one of these kind of state-specific analyses?
It depends what we use. The model's pretty quick. The back end of collecting this data for the last 20 years and regularizing it at dollars per acre per year is where the real effort's gone into. So we can turn around evaluation with that high-level tool, depending on the scale, between a week and a month. A typical kind of traditional ecosystem services valuation, which is more defensible, takes probably around 3 months.
Yes, Stephen, I see you have a question. Let's see here. Ronnie, are we able to get Stephen off mute? Or Stephen, are you able to come off mute?
Let's see.
There we
Can
go.
you hear
We
me?
hear you.
Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was wondering in terms of the functional analysis where you're doing the meta-analysis, looking at all these different studies, do you get output per acre or are you getting for larger blocks of land? And then secondly, when you apply that to larger blocks of land, are you basically assuming that the ecosystem services by category apply to all of the acres within that block, that they're all equally productive in terms of ecosystem services?
Yeah, so that's exactly what happens. So the model produces dollar per acre values for each ecosystem service and land cover type. They are modified by those variables, so it's split up by riparian forest, non-riparian forest, urban forest, non-urban forest, and all those combinations. So where a certain land cover may differ among those attributes, they will have separate values. But yes, all of the per acre values by the model are applied to all the acres with those sets of attributes within a site. So if a roadless area had, say, 50 acres of riparian forest, all those 50 acres would get the same value.
And to add to that, kind of valuing the integrity of an ecosystem is a consistent difficulty with evaluation literature. Economists don't really pay attention to the health of an ecosystem. And when we first developed the initial iteration of this model, we went through about 180, 200 different studies with about 2,000 values. And ecosystem integrity was one of the variables we were trying to capture. And I think only 7 out of those 200 studies included some kind of description of the health of the ecosystem in that published paper. So it's very difficult as a field for us to account for the health of an ecosystem. So we have to assume that everything is, if not pristine, in functioning appropriately.
Stephen, does that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess the other comment in response to what they just discussed is that it seems like you can take these ecosystem services for a given plot of land, chunk of land of how many ever 1,000 acres, and then that could be the way in which one would utilize a field crew to go out and kind of explore boots on the ground ecosystem integrity so you get a better idea within that. And particularly given all the kinds of environmental threats, particularly or especially forest fires and wildfires, you'd have some sense of what acres there might not be performing or coming up as much as you would hope in terms of the actual service provision.
You could definitely do that as a way to incorporate integrity into the valuation that we've shared.
Mhm.
From our side, with developing the model, we have considered how we could try and retroactively include ecosystem integrity into the studies. So could we use machine learning on satellite data with some kind of biodiversity intactness index and look at the time the study was published and the state of the ecosystem then? Some of these studies go back, the max I think is around 20 years. So it's very difficult to try and estimate the integrity of the ecosystem in the studies that we bring into the model. So you're proposing doing it the other way around, which might be viable.
Thank you. Yeah, that answers my questions.
Other questions? I have another one for you guys. The online dashboard that y'all set up when it kind of spits out the findings when you kind of click the by state or by congressional district, does it's a slick interface that y'all have. Does it print that out pretty well, like in terms of like as like a leave behind for a member of Congress or other folks, or is it best just kind of as it lives online? Any insights about how well it does in terms of printouts?
I don't think we've tested it. We were really envisioning it as just like an online little fun thing to play around with. I'm not sure how it looks if you do like a print screen. Yeah, I think Natalie posted in the chat, we could make quick fact sheets for people who need state level results.
Yeah, so we have the kind of overall fact sheet for the Ohio River Basin Alliance. We created a congressional district level fact sheet, and they can just switch out the values and the map of the congressional districts with the natural ecosystems in it, and it's really interchangeable. But I don't think we have that function on this report.
No problem.
I had a question, if I can ask one. This is our first time exploring educational advocacy proactively at this scale. We have this model, and we're interested in whether we can use it for other purposes or other issues. Do people think that it's useful? Will you use this with groups? Will you include it in comments? Is it worth us doing this again? I guess I'm asking. Oh, there's a thumbs up.
Thumbs are floating up. I think this is going to be particularly useful to come off mute and kind of offer an option, particularly with like elected officials and policymakers. There could be some value in terms of communications, but when it comes to elected officials, when they kind of have to balance the multitude of interest, having this information about the economic value of conservation, I think will just be additive for all the other values to make sure that many of those elected officials know they're on firm footing with taking a position that's supportive of conserving roadless forests. That's members of Congress, that could be governors, so certainly officials in that regard. And then, yeah, absolutely, when it comes to comment letters, I think many groups are already thinking about kind of whether it's state-specific letters to the administration as a part of this process or the national letters that go in. So yes, absolutely, Glenn. Mike, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to weigh in that I think the printability is very important because I think a lot of the ways we would use it is as a handout after meeting with a staff member or a politician to leave something behind with them, and something in paper that they can put in their file or pass on would be really useful to have. And I just want to applaud Earth Economics for their work and I think the vision to try to come up with economic analysis that can be used to help value the benefits of wild areas. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions, remarks? Okay, well, I'm going to close this out here. So thank you, Earth Economics. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Angela, for doing the analysis, for walking us through your findings today. So we appreciate everybody who was able to join today. I know your schedules are super busy, so appreciate you all spending time here with us today. Hope you all found this session valuable. Like I mentioned before, this is all being recorded. We'll share a recording with you all soon. It'll probably live on that dashboard website that Earth Economics set up. And so, yeah, thank you again for being here, caring for our wildlands, and everybody have a great rest of your day. Take care.